I have a lot of really cool friends who do a lot of really cool things. I wanted to make it a goal to sit down with these friends and spend about 15 minutes or so getting to know them better and find out about their past, present, and their future. The result is this show. My name is Grant Baciocco, and this is 15 Minutes With. Luke Ski is an artist, a voiceover actor, and a comedy musician who was Dr. Demento's most requested artist of the 21st century. Welcome to the show, Luke. It's great to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me here. It's easier to be here now that I live in Burbank.
Yes,
as opposed to various places in the Midwest. So
exactly. So, man, gosh, you've created so much. You've put so much out in the world. But I want to start way back in the beginning. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small community called Pell Lake, Wisconsin, which is right next door to Lake Geneva, which is slightly more famous because it's kind of a tourist town in the greater Chicagoland tri-state area. I living there growing up, my mom was an art teacher. She got me and my siblings very much into creating all the time. I was in 4-H, did a lot of art projects and things there. She got us watching, Jim Henson very early. That was probably my first big creative influence ever was, Sesame Street and the Muppet Show and Fraggle Rock and stuff. Was also, of course, into Walt Disney and, the Peanuts, Charles Schultz. Just those three are probably my big three initial creative influences growing up. And then I would just do artwork and, make my own puppets and just try to be funny or whatever. So that was kind of, my starting point way back when.
So was it, you say you did artwork and you did puppets and stuff. Was it, you kind of did all of those things, or was there one, like, because your mom was an art teacher, were you more focused on the art stuff, or was it everything? You just found time to do it all?
Well, that was the nice thing about, being in something like 4-H was that it allowed you to explore multiple things at once. So every year there'd be like the county fair, and me and my siblings would do various forms of, flat artwork, but then we could also create puppets and enter that in a different category. Or we could even, my mom let me make animated films using her 8mm film camera. So I would, either through toys or claymation or, drawing on a chalkboard or cutouts or whatever, I would make these short animated films, and I could enter those in the photography section, which was kind of weird because, inventing a category for basically the one or two people in my family who wanted to enter things. So we would enter and we would win because we had no competition, and some parents in the county were like, well, that's not fair. It's like, well, then make your own films.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was nice to have that. I think by the time I got to about junior high school age, I was definitely much more focused on the idea of creating, comic strips or comic books for the purpose of, creating a world of characters that could eventually become an animated thing, either on TV or in film, probably TV. And that's kind of where I was heading towards in high school, was wanting to find a college that would teach me whatever practical skills I needed to learn to create my own show, because The Simpsons was like in its first couple of seasons when I was leaving high school. Then I was in college. That's when Ren and Stimpy and Beavis and Butthead broke big, and this whole idea of comedy creator-based animation for television was a big thing. I also love Tiny Toons, Animaniacs, stuff like that. So that's what I really wanted to do, is take these characters I invented in junior high school and high school and do something with them, and that's what led me down trying to find a way to do something with that in college, which didn't work out, but I graduated anyway and got a BFA in illustration. So. And
when did comedy music enter your life? Like, when did that hit you?
Well, I've always was, a comedy nerd since, as far back as I can remember. And, it really was bolstered when my parents got cable and I could finally see some, comedy specials on HBO. But back in about 1982, that was, I kind of consider this my origin point into comedy music that, the comedy music that was made for grown-ups, not like children's albums like, Sesame Street or the Muppets. It's like, those are awesome too, but the first album I heard that was an album of comedy music, aimed at, an adult audience, was this K-Tel compilation called Just for Laughs. And it had, it was the first album where I ever heard anything by Weird Al Yankovic, because it had the original bathroom recording of My Bologna and Another One Rides the Bus. Mm-hmm. But it also had Take Off by Bob and Doug McKenzie, Valley Girl, Cow Patty, Peter the Meter Reader, Double Dutch Bus, just all this, classic Demento era stuff, and I hadn't even heard of him yet,
Right.
other than seeing his name on this album and Weird Al's name on this album, and I had no idea who they were, other than I was just captivated by it. And then very shortly after that is when Eat It came out, and then suddenly, the whole nation knew who Weird Al was, and I saw Dr. Demento on the Real People TV show, and then it was like, oh, so there's this thing, and so that really grabbed me way back when, and it wasn't until my college years, because I grew up in this small area of Wisconsin that was about 90 minutes from Chicago, but there was no internet and no way for me to find out how I could even tune into Dr. Demento if he was even in my area. He was supposedly on the Loop in Chicago, but I'm not sure if we heard it out there. But when halfway through my college experience in Kansas City, somebody clued me in that he was on a station out there. So I became an immediate religious listener to the show every Sunday night, recording the shows and then making mixtapes from those tapes, and just, I spent 5 years just delving into it. And in fact, part of the reason I stuck around Kansas City a few extra years was just because I didn't want to not live in a city that I didn't have for sure access to hearing that show on the radio every week. Plus, I started my own caricature business after I got my BFA in illustration, and I had a caricature stand at a casino, just a one-person business that was profitable back then because it was the late 90s, and people spent money on frivolous things like caricatures. So, but yeah, it was the, suddenly I was enveloped in this whole Dr. Demento, listening, and, almost immediately I started sending him tapes, and didn't get in on the first few tries. He really liked my ideas, but, I was recording them on a, dual cassette karaoke machine I bought at a Walgreens for $30, and after a few tries, he said, you really should get to a professional studio and get digitally recorded, and then, you'll have a better chance of getting on the air. Mm-hmm. And, I followed the doctor's orders, and that's what I did. And October of 1996 was the first time he played one of my songs on the air. It was a parody of a one-hit wonder hip-hop song called What's Up Doc, Can We Rock by Fushnikins featuring Shaquille O'Neal, called What's Up Spock, about what was the entire Star Trek universe at the time, a song about the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and the character Q. So that was the first song of mine he ever played, and I released it on I sent him an ADAT tape, and then he said, okay, next step for you is release it on a CD. And so the following spring I put out another album and released both of them on CD at the same time. And once those two albums were on CD, there was another track, a parody of Cypress Hill's Insane in the Brain I did about Pinky in the Brain, called Insane and the Brain. And once that was on disc, he started playing me more often, and that song ended up being the number 7, I think, on the Funny 25 of 1997. So that was the first hit I had in his show, and it took me a few more years to really get the ball rolling as far as being regularly featured on his show, but that first success was like really what made me say, okay, I want to spend a significant amount of my spare time doing this. Mm-hmm. Plus, about the same time, I had started attending a lot of fandom conventions, and came to this, realization, like, hey, they're looking, they're an entertainment thing. They're looking for, they have stages. They're I'll start asking around to see if these people will let me perform at their sci-fi conventions or whatever. And indeed I did. And it was, kind of this weird uphill battle because, nowadays the notion of, oh, there's some band doing funny, nerdy music at this convention, that's commonplace. And nobody was really doing it back then except for the people, doing, the folk stuff. Anyone who wanted to, like, get up with an electric instrument or backing tracks was just kind of like, what kind of freaky madness is this? So it took me a while, but basically I spent all my time, making a living doing caricatures on the weekends, also performing in Comedy Sports when I was still in Kansas City, doing improv, and then working on these songs, going to conventions. So yeah, I spent most of the past 20 years trying to make a living as a caricature artist and a comedy musician, which I just barely made a living at by the combination of those two things. And just always working on whatever projects came to mind that I thought might, artistically satisfy me, make people laugh, and or get me somewhere. So
yeah. Well, I want to just back up really quickly because we'll talk more about the songs that you've written and stuff. But back in those early days when you first discovered Dr. Demento, of course, Weird Al was a big influence. What other artists that you heard on the show were like big influences for you?
Well, it's like not that I want to. If I was going to fully go into my dissatisfaction with my college experience, that would be a whole nother hour-long podcast. But so I did learn things there. But to me, my real college education began once I started hearing his show, because it was like, oh, here's this master course on the past 75 years of recorded audio comedy that I listened to 2 hours a week, and I learned so much because obviously I had all the Dr. Demento compilation CDs and stuff like that. So, I had heard like Stan Freberg's Dragnet thing, but that was all I had heard up till that point. To me, Stan Freberg was just, oh, this guy that does the Dragnet spoofs. I had no idea how much awesome, volumes upon volumes of awesomeness that Stan Freberg had created. So he immediately became a huge influence on me. And then obviously, there's the other big names like Tom Lehrer and Alan Sherman and Spike Jonze. I mean, man, I wish I had. It's like when people say, like, if you had a time machine, what would you go do? I would go watch Spike Jonze, in a session or at a concert and just see, like, there's no multi-tracking or no. It's like, no, they did that. They did that live, man. That just blows my mind just to think that how many takes did it take to get some of those tracks right? It's like, oh, somebody screwed up the cowbell part. We have to start over again, you know?
You shoot the gun first and then drop the flower pot, not the other way around. Yeah.
So yeah, just and then also learning about, the contemporary guys like Mark Jonathan Davis, a.k.a. Richard Cheese, like all the stuff he did before and the stuff he did, currently back then in the, mid to late 90s. It was, eventually I started meeting other people, like you and like Devo Spice and Tony Goldmark and, Shoebox of Worm Quartet and Ian and Kyle and, Carrie and everybody. Like I found finding this whole network of like-minded people who also were this into making comedy music from all across the country. So it's a good thing the internet is a thing so that we could all find each other and virtually hang out and, start establishing friendships. And then with, as computer technology got better, we could all start cameoing in each other's songs by like recording files and emailing them back and forth or however, So yeah, I'm sorry if I'm getting I veered off of your question here. Maybe.
No, this is great. This is great. What do you remember the first idea? Because you may have written songs before that, but like the first thing, like I'm going to write this and I'm going to send it to Dr. Demento. Do you remember what your first thing was, even if it didn't ever wind up getting played?
Well, the aforementioned "What's Up, Spock" was important. Just before my discovery of, I can listen to Dr. Demento in Kansas City, me and my friends were screwing around making some, song parodies just to amuse each other. Mm-hmm. And there was a joke on Beavis and Butthead, and I don't think this is too this language is too harsh for your podcast, but they had this one joke where they were watching a video, Humping Around, that's what it was, by Bobby Brown, I think. And Butthead's like, is he talking about humping a hound or whatever? So we just thought that was hilarious. So we did a parody of, a kind of a meaningless parody of House of Pain's Jump Around called Hump a Hound, based on that dumb Beavis and Butthead joke. And the significance of that is that was as far as like doing parodies of hip-hop songs go, because there wasn't a lot of that. I mean, meanwhile, Devo Spice was doing it, but I'd never heard of him yet.
Right.
But there was, from my point of view, nobody was doing that and doing it well, because it was just, I won't even go. That's another hour-long podcast I won't get into. But doing that song parody helped me figure out the matrix of how I would write hip-hop song parodies, which is you got to try to match the rhyme scheme and, as much as possible, the scansion of the syncopation of what they're saying. There was this run of lines that I wrote a set of lyrics to, and that helped me figure out, like, eureka, this is how this is gonna work. So the final lyrics were on Mario Kart, when I drive they all dart, I smoke more carts than there are in a Walmart parking lot. Sure enough, he got shot by a heat-seeking red shell, you're sucking a brat. And writing that helped me figure out, okay, that's how I'm going to write parodies for hip-hop songs. And that led to What's Up Spock and Insane in the Brain and a whole bunch of other stuff. And about half of the stuff I did was hip-hop parodies because that was the music I loved, growing up and everything.
Yeah,
and,
I was going to ask, where did that love of hip hop come from?
I think it came from the fact that, it was new and interesting and not at all anything like what I had been hearing growing up out in, semi-rural Wisconsin. But also I'm very much into percussion, so something with a beat, grabs my attention. And also, in general, back then, hip-hop had the best sense of humor about itself as a musical genre. I mean, they were just always, fun party songs or acting goofy. I mean, you look at the Fat Boys or Digital Underground or Fresh Prince, they just looked like they were having the most fun, and I was just attracted to that. So, I grew up with a steady diet of comedy stuff and hip hop. So yeah. So about half of the songs I did were mostly parodies of, hip hop songs, because that was the other thing, was that nobody was touching those, at least not in a serious way. Like, Weird Al did, like the one-off hip hop parody way back when, but there wasn't a glut of, like, nowadays, if Kanye West puts out a track, the next day there's going to be 20 parodies of it on YouTube. It's like, right. But back then, like, nobody was touching it, except for Devo Spice, but I didn't know him yet. So
right.
It was so great meeting Devo and then finding out, oh, you did a parody Baby Got Back too? Oh, okay. And just comparing notes with each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I just kind of felt like back then, basically the matrix of me. I keep using the word matrix. I'm sorry, dude.
It's all right.
Listening to Dr. Demento the early days in 1995, I'm like, nobody's doing like, there's all this kind of baby boomer songs about the Andrew Griffith Show and classic Star Trek and the Brady Bunch, but nobody's doing songs about, Seinfeld or Married with Children or Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and at the same time, nobody was doing parodies of hip-hop songs that I felt were good and authentic. It was just lame morning show DJ types who were these, baby boomer white guys who didn't care about the genre and were just making fun of it. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to take those two things and combine them, and hence things like What's Up Spock and Insane in the Brain were born.
Yeah.
But, about half the other stuff, I mean, I did a Bob Dylan parody about Star Wars that my mom loves called Star Wars Trilogy Homesick Blues. Mm-hmm. And I did, one of my early ones was YMCA called YODA, back when nobody cared about Star Wars either, during that dark period of the late 80s, early 90s, when Star Wars was totally out. But
what was your first song to hit number one on Dr. Demento?
I believe it was Insane in the Brain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it was, bopping around, because back then he was doing the Funny Five, right. And I'm pretty sure it hit number one at least once or twice during the year of 1997.
And were you listening live when that happened?
I probably was.
Yeah.
I don't have a specific memory of it, but I would stay up Sunday nights in Kansas City. It started at midnight, and I would just hit record and, get to the end of the 1 hour side of a tape and then flip it over during the commercial break and just go on through.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I just remember even not being on the Funny Five, just hearing one of my comedy songs on the radio on his show, it never got old. It always seemed like this is such a cool, magical thing that I created this comedy thing, and now it's being heard by, a national radio audience just because he thinks I live up to his standard. So that just meant the world to me, and it still does. I mean, he's still doing the show on the internet, and it always makes me happy to do a song and find out that that it lived up to his standard and get it in, because not every song I make even today gets on his show, but I when it doesn't, it's like, all right, so he wasn't interested in that one, I'll make another one. Right. So yeah.
Well, and we're running close to the end here, but I do want to talk about and we don't have to talk about anything that you're not allowed to talk about or whatever, but the reason you're out here in Burbank is because you are now working for Cartoon Network, and as someone who was an artist and who was making 8mm cartoons and stop motion stuff, how does that feel? What's that like?
This is very literally my dream come true job. I mean, it's the the pop culture parallel I like to bring up is the notion how in the Karate Kid, like, Danielson is like, doing chores around Miyagi's house, not realizing that the whole time he was actually training. So that's kind of the way I look at it, is that, the college thing didn't work out, so I spent 20 years making comedy songs and drawing caricatures and doing other stuff, which ended up being like the perfect training ground for when, Kyle Carosa came along with this show he created. And, all of the skills I've developed over the years ended up making me an ideal person to be a storyboarder and writer and voiceover person on his show. So the show is called Mighty Magiswords, and so far the stuff that's been released is stuff that I was made before I joined the production. And there's 10 3-minute cartoons that you can see on the Cartoon Network YouTube page and at their website. Mighty Magiswords is about a brother and sister team of adventurers called Vamber and Prohias in kind of a mostly medievalish kind of universe. They collect these crazy magic swords that all have hilarious powers. Like, there's a cheese sword that, like, magically shoots, whatever type of cheese you want at people. There's a magnet sword that works like a huge magnet. There's a dolphin sword that shoots water. So there's all different kinds of swords, and they collect them and go on adventures to either find more swords or earn money to buy more swords from whoever sells them. So I was such an instant fan of this show when he started showing stuff to me of its existence, and he asked me to do a little storyboard to, this is when I'm still living in Chicago, of course. He asked me to do a storyboard to just see what kind of storyboarding chops I had, and just said, do a short scene. And I misunderstood his instructions. I thought he wanted like a whole episode. So I did this whole story. It was about 200 drawings, like pencil on paper, with a whole plot and everything. And I even had a song in the episode. And once I got done with that, it took me a few weeks. And then I said to myself, well, you know what? With my recording equipment and everything, I could probably record all the voices to this and whip together an animatic within about a day. And so that's what I did. So I made this rudimentary animatic with the voices and me just kind of humming the song in tempo, to make it all work out for my bit. And so I sent the animatic and a PDF of the storyboard to him and said, okay, watch this MP4 first, and then look at the other thing. And he was like, his response was, Luke, you incredible weirdo. And then that same day he showed it to his bosses there, and they, I didn't know this until later, but basically once they saw it, they were like, okay, let's plan on, making this guy a part of the team eventually. But, it took a while. Eventually I ended up, getting a position out there, and Kyle and Lindsay, by the way, I should mention Kyle is also known as TV's Kyle at the Fump. He also does comedy music. Yes. That's how he and I got to know each other. So he and his wife Lindsay let me live in their back bedroom for the first 4 months of me being involved when I was a storyboard revisionist, learning how to use the programs and just, know the ropes of working on a real TV production. And then when this is the part where I have to be careful what I say, when it was decided that there would be more things to be made, that's when I became a full storyboarder and writer, and also here and there I was getting to do voices of some of the kind of more C-level characters on the show, and that's when I knew that the commitment would be so that it would make sense for me to get my own place to live. So I got an apartment in downtown Burbank, just a half a mile from where I live. I'm probably paying more than I should for it, but I kind of don't care. So it's been this surreal, experience that's, I'm so happy working on this show. Other things, personally have been tough to deal with, and, I'm doing my best to, be the grown-up that I am and deal with it and appreciate every moment of having this amazing job that my friend Kyle got me set up for.
Yeah.
And just creatively speaking, being able to be like, here's an idea I pitched. Oh, and now it's being made into an actual cartoon thing. And more recently, the story I mentioned earlier, the one that I, initially, whipped up for Kyle and made into the animatic that, got the people saying, okay, we want to bring him on. That story, was not the one I'm currently working on, but the one before it, we actually made it. So it's going to be a for realsies thing. So it's like, imagine you're really into, Harry Potter, and you wrote some fan fiction, and then they made your fan fiction into a real Harry Potter movie. That's what I feel like. It's like, I wrote a fan thing, and now, oh my gosh, it's like I saw the animatic that had the final voices in it, and I'm like, this is so cool. Yeah. I can't believe it.
I wanted to ask a little bit about your creative process. I think I don't know if I read somewhere or I heard you say something that you carry around a notebook with you to write stuff in. How do you keep track of your creative ideas?
Well, I do have, I'm by no means a technophobe. I have a PC home computer. I have a MacBook laptop, which I got through Kickstarter, thank goodness. So, and a tablet and a phone and all the other stuff people have. But a lot of the times it just really helps me to, physically put pencil to paper or whatever and write down my thoughts in lists. And so I always have a big notebook that I just am constantly, writing ideas in or keeping track of my thoughts. And I always keep them and kind of label them on the front, like what span of time it covers, so that I have a written record of of everything going, back is oh man, I'm trying to remember how far back those books go, at least to my college years. So I probably got 20 years worth of notebooks. And it came in really handy this one time. I decided on one of the podcasts I do, I had this idea to go through all of my old song ideas. This is mainly I do original songs too, but it was easier in this case to do it just the song parodies. And I found I made a list of every song idea I had ever come up with, that I never got around to doing. And then I basically listed them off with a brief description on my podcast, and 11 of the songs, and I said, okay, you people respond to this and tell me which of these you want me to make into a real song, and whichever ones get the most support, I'll make them into real songs. Mm-hmm. And doing that, I came up with my Mel Brooks song, It's Good to Be the King. I did a song about the Kevin Smith films called Red Bank, New Jersey, to the tune of Denton, USA from Shock Treatment. And what was the third one? I think the third one was a parody of The Remedy by Jason Mraz about the Firefly film Serenity. And doing that project also helped me realize there was a couple ideas I left behind that, just for the sake of satisfying my own nerdiness, I wanted to do. One was a parody of Motown Philly about Monty Python called Walking Silly. And the other one was a parody of Snoop Doggy Dogg's original hit called Who Am I, What's My Name? But that's the one with the chorus that goes, Snoop Doggy Dogg. So I did a parody of that about Peanuts called Snoopy the Dog, because I was just looking at it, wait, it's been 17 years. Nobody's done this parody yet. Why do I have to do everything? So I did that song, and then it ended up being the most requested song of the year on the Dr. Demento show, and it won a Logan Award for Outstanding Parody Song of 2011. So it's like, all right, I guess saving all those old notebooks paid off.
Yeah.
Because I can mine it for past ideas and stuff. But yeah, so my creative process is definitely one that involves physically writing things down. I love using dry erase boards or post-it notes or whatever, and it just helps me to physically be able to, like all those sci-fi movies where they see the screens with people putting up their hands like Iron Man, I'm moving things around with my hand. It's like, that doesn't exist yet, so I'll just write things down on index cards and move them all around my table until this looks the way I want it to look, and then I'll type it up into a list on my computer or whatever.
Yeah. Well, Luke, if people want to find out more about you online, where can they go?
Well, thegreatlukesski.com is my main website. I don't think I've updated it since MarsCon, but in general, that's where I do my best to, once every month or so, update everyone on what I've been doing and, recent episodes of my podcast and such. I should mention the podcasts I do. One is called with the creator of Mighty Magic Swords, Kyle Carosa. It's called Kyle and Luke Talk About Tunes, and our website for that is kyleandluke.com. But I'm pretty sure you can find that on iTunes if you search for it. I also do the Fumpcast every week with Devo Spice. On Thursday night, we'll interview whoever posted songs that week. So that's at thefump.com. Look at the right side of the menu bar. You'll see the link for the Fumpcast so you can get the thing for that. And then me and Carrie Dalby just do a personal, stupid, silly podcast with funny songs interjected into it called Luke and Carrie's Bad Rapport. And it's if you like 15-minute podcasts, this probably isn't the podcast for you, because she and I talk forever, and we're just doing it to entertain ourselves for the most part. But we do play comedy songs in it too, so who knows? What else have I not mentioned or plugged?
Are you
yet?
on Twitter?
Yes, I am on Twitter, at The Great Luke Ski. All is one word there. And then my Facebook page is facebook.com/The Great Luke Ski. And one more thing, because we haven't specifically talked about this, but I would at least want to throw a mention of it. On my YouTube page, which I'm pretty sure is also youtube.com/The Great Luke Ski, I did a bunch of puppet videos back between 2010 and 2013, and it was because of Grant that they exist, at least to the quality level that they do, because when Carrie had an idea for a thing that involved puppets, I asked Grant, hey, where can I find, high quality puppet patterns, and he led me to projectpuppet.com, which became the basis of me making dozens of puppets that look primarily like other friends of mine from the comedy music world. And we did a bunch of silly, awesome puppet videos, one of which was a full-on parody of the Muppet Show, done with people from thefump.com, so we called it The Fumpet Show. So if that and my other things interest you, you can check that out on my YouTube page.
All right. Well, Luke, thank you so much for talking to me today. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you for letting me go on and on and on like I always do.
No, it was my pleasure. The Great Luke Ski was my guest on this supersized episode of 15 Minutes With. And guess what? We talked for even longer than what you just heard. If you'd like to hear us discuss topics like the MarsCon Dementia music track and the Funny Music Project, you can snag that audio file on the Saturday Morning Media app for iOS and Android. The app is free, and you can find the extra audio in the bonus section for this episode. Visit Luke Ski online at www.lukeski.com. 15 Minutes With on the GrantCast is a production of Saturday Morning Media and made possible in part by the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who've gone to www.patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up a monthly donation for as little as $1 a month. Huge thanks to Shay Stewart, Mer Lafferty, Jeff Peterson, Dale Gadania, Steven Staver, Jackie Klimo, Melissa Crawford, Chuck, Matthew Wayne Selznick, Dave Slusher of the Evil Genius Chronicles, Mike Coughlin, Dorothy Baciocco, John D., Kathy Crawford, Brian Greer, Carrie Whitney, Chuck Tomasi, Chris Foster, Stephen Ing, Clinton of ComedyForecast.com, Vicky DeVries, Mike Wobschall, and Twitter user ButtsInGear, aka Wildcard. If you'd like to support this show and the other fun content from Saturday Morning Media, become a patron. Head on over to www.patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media. That's www.patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media. Set up your donation today. Or you can tell a friend about the show or leave us a review on iTunes. If you have feedback for the show, you can send it to me directly at grant@throwingtoasters.com or get in touch via Twitter. My username is ToasterBoy. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back in another week with another interview. The GrantCast is copyright 2016 Saturday Morning Media, Grant Baciocco, executive producer. All rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com.